welcome to
I'm Garry Adelman.
And I'm Tim Smith.
And tonight, this is our first ever. I want to thank each and every one of the 1,804 of you. Troy Howard told me he got 86 people today for his battle walk, so I'm glad that we have so many here today. We basically threw up 270 pictures that have to do with the second day at Gettysburg, and we're just going to talk about it. We cut it down to the modest number of 210. Which is about twice as many as we've ever shown on a program before, so I'm really glad that we have this format where we can finally show you all a proper number of photos, and I predict that as it gets darker, the photos will show up a little bit better.
You know what you got?
What?
Happy Devil's Den Day.
Yes, happy anniversary. Secondly, when the National Park Service approached us 6 months ago about doing an anniversary program, they said, you want to do a battle walk? And we said, no, we've done some historical research on the matter, and we heard the real feel is going to be like over 100 that day. It's going to be really hot, so give us an evening program. So I hope you appreciate our advanced knowledge of things. And let's get right into it, if it will work. I guess I got to stand here. There we go. So we're going to be talking about Civil War photography, so it's important to talk about how these things were made. As I think most of you know, Civil War documentary photos were very difficult to make back then. They had to take weird contraptions like this, mobile darkroom wagons, out into battlefields and live in them. You can see some of the chemicals off to the right there. You can see the darkroom box here and some of the other things that they need in order to take Civil War photos. They had to bring bulky Civil War cameras with them to take pictures, such as this one in Knoxville, Tennessee. And there, using this equipment, they went out and photographed the Civil War. These are the boys of 61. As horribly as their clothes fit, as much as they're tucking their socks into their pants, what's that called again? Blousing, thank you. That they're blousing, they did it in 1861. That's a real Civil War photo. And when they would go to camps around the Civil War, this is what the first Civil War photos, at least in the East, really looked like. The soldiers had nothing to do after the Civil War started at Fort Sumter. Not a whole lot happened as these giant armies gathered around Washington, D.C. And here you have them playing games. Look, there was just no end, actually, to what they would do. Come on. To what they would do. I mean, this is, I don't care if you're about to fight in a battle of Bull Run. I don't want to be this dude. You would get seriously hurt, but I guess they're daredevils just to get into the Civil War in the first place. But eventually, of course, there would be some things that would relate to the Civil War, of course, including this photo, presumably by Matthew Brady and his crew, that shows dead Confederate or dead soldiers on Matthews Hill. Okay, many of you have seen this photo before. I think I'll ask you to focus in on this tree here. Here's a closer view of it, and you can see the 4 soldiers laying there. But when you look at the tree, you clearly see that that same tree is there with the same 4 soldiers, very much alive in different positions, shooting. And then there's another photo of these same 4 soldiers switched around yet again in different positions. So you all know what happened. Of course, the 4 soldiers are here. The photographer says, oh, I like that picture. Move around a little bit. Let me take another one. And then up comes the enemy. Shoots them all. And they suffer 100% casualties, but the photographer is unhurt. So I guess we have it all figured out. Or maybe the photographer said, could you guys lay down? There's no battle. I know you're wearing people overcoats, and this is supposedly a summer battle. But, could you do that for me? Okay, so there you have it. But soon enough, there would be plenty enough to shoot. And documentary photography would really be born on the Virginia Peninsula. And eventually, of course, this would lead them to Gettysburg. We didn't really plan this out. Let me just keep going. That was all one sentence. Okay, so here, of the photographers that came to Gettysburg, there are several that photographed the battlefield in 1863. The first to arrive was Alexander Gardner. And he would be followed by others in July of 1863, including the Tyson brothers, including a guy named Gudikins from Philadelphia, including Matthew Brady out of his Washington, D.C. gallery. Later that year by other photographers covering the Gettysburg Address. I believe the Weavers came and shot some battlefield pictures as well. But Alexander Gardner is the only one to get here before the dead soldiers had been interred. And this, of course, as many of you know, is the slaughter pen near Devil's Den, or right across from Devil's Den. You can see several bodies, and you can see a distinctive rock sticking up there. I think we have a close-up of that. You can even see here, you can see a soldier there, and a soldier there, and one laying over here, and one up top here. And remember, 4 wounded soldiers for every single dead soldier in the the Civil War on average and at Gettysburg. So when you imagine this, plus to mention that some of the wounded were taken away and later died in hospitals. So you're looking at a very bloody scene even in this very small area. Well, in 1967, William Frazanito, who really started this field of using historical photographs as primary documents, set out to find, among other things, this particular rock, which he did in just about March or April of 1967, the month before I was born. Come on! There we go. I guess I got to stand right here. So there it was. Did it work in front too? But then I'll be blocking people. So he found this rock, called it the split rock or the table-like boulder, and that led to everything else. Now you knew where the slaughter pen was. It was not at the foot of Little Round Top. Rather, it was at the foot of Big Round Top. And suddenly that changes everything that we know about, all the accounts that supposedly took place in the slaughter pen.
And one of the things that we find fascinating about these photographs is the fact that they document the appearance of the battlefield at the time of the battle. And Gettysburg has a remarkable collection of material, documents, photography, that actually gives us an idea of what the appearance of the field was like. And these photographs can be used to help us make the battlefield look more like it did at the time.
Absolutely, and what I would say too is much like the Battle of Bull Run in July of 1861, where every soldier was going there, and if they were lucky to survive, or even on the way out there, they all wrote about it. It was their grand adventure, the first one. Gettysburg having emerged as the greatest battle of the Civil War, and if you ask me, sort of the mecca of the Civil War. Look at you all here right now in the evening. Many of you have been out in the heat today and everything like that. This is no accident. It's not just because Gettysburg is the biggest battle. It's because it was the first battlefield to have land preserved as a battlefield park and had that whole Gettysburg Address thing. And it was near all of the large population centers in the East. And I think those four things came together to conspire to make Gettysburg this place that we all want to come. And because it was that, this is where all the veterans came. And when they came here, they wrote about it. When they came here, they put a monument here. And all these things together, the photos, the early maps, the accounts, the veterans' experiences, really allow us to understand this place pretty well. Here is the same view of the slaughter pen. You can take a look at the table-like boulder or the split rock there and see that it just sits there right off of the stone wall where you parked at Devil's Den today. Of course, the Park Service has done a great job clearing these trees back, but now it's much harder to keep the undergrowth at bay, and it's a pretty thick sort of set of undergrowth going on there now. Okay, well, so this is William Frazanito, and in 1975 he came out with his Gettysburg, A Journey in Time, and this really changed everything. It was something much more than just finding out where photos were taken and showing you the same place now. Rather, the goal was to sort of figure out where it was taken and thereby transform the historic Civil War photos into historical documents. These are no longer fine arts pieces. These are actual historical documents that are rich as information, and perhaps despite that I showed you that picture of Matthews Hill, really don't lie very much. So he created this whole field of study by which if you could figure out when and where a photo was taken, suddenly that photo is very, very valuable, and you can learn about American history, or the Civil War, or the Gettysburg battlefield, or of course the Battle of Gettysburg. And it really changed everything when he did this. So there you have these photos. These original glass plates are very high in resolution. You can get way in. I'll zoom into this photo, into the middle of it. Before I do, and here's another photo taken in the slaughter pen as well. Many of you have been to this spot. All these rocks, even the distinctive cracks in the rocks, even the ridges on the rocks, and everything like that. Even this little thing here, which I am just obsessed with, is still there today, right when you go there. You about to read something, Tim? You need to read it out of the book?
Yes. Well, I want to do a reading from our Bible, our Gettysburg Bible.
He's holding
a metaphor.
He's holding Gettysburg, A Journey in Time, but I will be impressed if he turns to the page and then doesn't look at it. Let's see.
No. See, to do a reading from the book, you must read from the book.
Okay. That sounds like a good excuse.
Okay. Bloated, drenched by recent showers, and emitting odors of the most offensive nature, this poor soul had been lying motionless in death for nearly 4 days when his distorted form attracted the attention of Alexander Gardner. That Gardner was here endeavoring to capture the tragic loneliness of dying on a battlefield far from home is readily apparent. But beyond this, there perhaps is a message of eternal rest and termination of worldly suffering, a concept expressed in Gardner's original caption. All over now.
Good. Hold on, everybody. I have to post that. So we know where that last photo of the slaughter pen was taken, and we know exactly where these rocks are. And in that slaughter pen picture, you can see this rock very clearly. You can see this rock a little bit on the back side of it. And I've always been bothered for years, ever since I was the second one to locate this spot in 1989 on my second trip to Gettysburg. I was bothered that you couldn't see him in the photo, and only this week, when I was blowing up for the 100th time the high-res version of it, did I look in the other photo and see that if I, okay, so here's the spot today, so you can see a lot of these same rocks. Let's see if I can see the thing with which I'm obsessed. It's right in there. It's harder to see right there, but trust me. But if you look at the faraway slaughter pen shot and the closer view, so there's the farther away one, and you zoom into this area specifically right there, you can actually see over the rock, I can see one of his buttonholes and his coat sticking up for the first time. Now, what does this teach us about the Civil War? Nothing. Okay? But you can use these photos, triangulate them, understand the battlefield a little bit better, understand the photos a little bit better, and yes, determine yet another way that I definitely know that Frazanito's original research of placing this guy makes sense, because suddenly you can see, look at even the ridge in the coat right here. You can see the same ridge in the coat, not to mention one of the buttonholes through which some of the light of the rock is passing through. If you're a big enough loser, this is really cool stuff. And between those two photos, right, the slaughter pen, also just out of view, blocked largely by this rock, is two other soldiers, of course, lying on a bank with some rocks which are very evident today. I'll ask you maybe to look at this rock with the distinctive crack in it, or this larger rock over here with distinctive ones, or the two rocks on the bank there. And look at the modern photo. There's the rocks on the bank. There's this. Here's that. So these guys are laying right there. Okay. Now, when you look at another photo of that, one of those two bodies, you can look at it zoomed in, and, you know, I'm not doing this for any shock factor. I'm doing this for a particular reason. You can zoom in on this particular soldier and actually see that this guy has been shot in the right temple. Okay. This guy was not mortally wounded. Okay. We know where he was killed, right? He didn't crawl to some other place or anything like that. This is where this guy was killed. In fact, you can see his brain matter sort of oozing out of his head into a little puddle onto the ground. That dude died there. Now, because we know that, okay, we can maybe conjecture, maybe he was hiding behind this rock, and if he shot in the right temple, maybe it's fire from a little round top off to his right coming in. I don't know. But most importantly, because we know just where this is, William A. Frazanito documented this in our Bible, we can narrow him down. He is probably a member of the 44th or 48th Alabama or the 2nd Georgia. And if we know a lot of those guys died in hospitals, if we can account for a lot of the other ones, I have him narrowed down to less than 42 people. Okay, maybe that's the best we can do for him. Okay, I don't see this as an exposition of looking at a grotesque photo, which it is. And I don't look at it for shock value for 8th graders who just love it, and I apologize to any 8th graders in the audience. Rather, you can get a lot out of it. Now, you can also take these photos, blow them up, and take them out to the same spot today.
Anybody bring their 3D glasses with them?
Nobody put on their regular glasses. It might work, but you can take...
Yeah, put them on, it'll work.
You can take 3D photos out, and it's really like windows in time. Many of you have heard me talk about this 4D concept before, that it's really opening up a new dimension. It actually works this way. I know there's some people here that were on our July 4th program 1 year ago, and you can do this out on the battlefield. Wow, thank you. I'm not even asking for it. That's a pretty rare thing, but it's really cool to be able to do this, and man, that is our goal as battlefield guides, right? To get you all, anybody, ourselves included, in the research that we do, to say, now I understand a little bit better. That's what it was like. And man, photography, when combined with other resources, is just about one of the best windows in. This is my window in. I know everybody has one, your high school teacher or something like that, or a movie that you saw, or something like that. Everybody got their thing, a certain book you read. This was my entry in. And if you hit on enough cylinders, you'll eventually get everybody.
One thing you got to be careful for, though, is that we make these discoveries based upon the photographs, but we are very careful to only say things we know to be true. And in a lot of these cases, in these photographs, people say things, read things in articles and even on the internet, obviously, and they're just made up, and there's just no way to know it. Like I remember years ago, this tree obviously is cut down with an axe, and someone wrote, obviously, the cameraman cut down that tree to get a better area for his photograph. You know, we have no way of knowing that. And recently, some of you may have read that someone keeps conjecturing that guy's been moved. He has not been moved. But when you write 3,000 words about it, somehow it seems more convincing.
Yeah, and actually what it is that people, trust me, I know, and despite that we're making fun of some people here, you know, we want you all to go out and try to make some of these discoveries. If I just last week could notice that guy's buttonhole, there's probably one or two of you that think that's actually interesting, and you can make little discoveries like that, and some of the other ones we'll go over today. But some people just find something, they say, oh, maybe it's this, it must be that, let me write an article about it and say it's true. You have to be a little bit more careful than that, because this business is fraught with error. Not too far away in the slaughter pen as well, there was a distinctive group of rocks that nobody could find for a long time. Frazanito couldn't find it when he published his original book. You can see a distinctive triangular rock there. You see some bodies here in the woods, and you know you can find it. I found it in 1992, and only at that time did I find out that Frazanito had found it a few years before, or so he said. All I know is I took him out there and I said, this is the spot, right? And he went like this. Actually, I don't know. In another photo you don't see very often, a photo of a dead Confederate soldier inside the triangular field. Now, have that ghost, people. In the Civil War, there was a photo taken inside the triangular field, because that's the wall of the triangular field. Some of you know what I mean.
It might be the first of thousands of photographs recorded in the triangular field.
Yes.
Because everybody tries it.
It's true, and they all come out. In any case, this is we call the Fortress Rock. This rock is at the base of the triangular field. That's below Devil's Den. Many of you might not know where that is there, but we just like to show our more obscure photos and what they look like today as well, although this photo was probably taken in 1991.
Oh, should we point out that you and I discovered that location?
Yes, yes, and there are still more out there. We'll go through some of these at the end, and this is by no means set for Tim and I that we can somehow go and find this stuff. Now, if you find a place and it's not right, we'll jump all over you, make fun of you in programs and stuff like that. But these things work out. When you find it, everything falls into place. You don't have to convince anybody that you're right when you are. And we'll go over that somewhat later. Something, again, that I never noticed until about last year was, here's a photo taken in the Valley of Death, right at Devil's Den. That's a little round top in the background. Many of you park right across from these rocks and might not know it. Well, just last year I was looking, I saw a gun on the ground over there, so I zoomed in on it, not only saw that gun, but clearly what looks to be some disturbed ground and likely a grave right there. So if you can't find dead soldiers and whatnot here, where there are dead soldiers lying around, dead Confederates, this is likely the grave of a Union soldier, and if I had to put money on it, I'd say probably a soldier of the 4th Maine. And there's only so many that it could be as well, because a lot of them died in the hospital. Here's another photo of Little Round Top from ground level, from right here, the same area. And if you zoom in on, there's two photos similar, one from higher up and one from here. One of them you can see some photographic assistants walking through the ground, but if you focus in on one area here, what is going on here? One bad photo. You know what? This was the coolest photo in the entire show. Give me a sec. But trust me, William Frazanito found that there's actually another dead soldier right in here. Okay, and here's one of our points here. Devil's Den and the Rose Farm happen to have been well documented by photographers, so we think, wow, there's really slaughter here. This is what the whole battlefield looked like. There are bodies everywhere. Just read the accounts of the people who came and saw it afterward. Okay, there we go. So, Tim, you want to do these? I keep putting them on the spot.
This is a Samuel Weaver photograph recorded in November of 1863. I believe November 11th, 1863. And also, coincidentally, the cover of our first edition of the Devil's Den book. We're obsessed with this photograph. This is John Fulton Reynolds' relatives, I guess his brother and sisters, on a tour of the battlefield in November. And the photograph, I believe, is captioned originally, "The Signal Rock."
And these are some of the earliest photos of the big rocks.
This may be the first real photograph of the wall of rocks that we generally refer to as Devil's Den.
We figured that Gardner was there in the afternoon and the sun was probably setting, so all his photos are taken in the other direction. None of them are taken toward the west, so we really don't have it. Now, what Weaver did afterward was take some of these soldiers you see here and say, aha, the Gettysburg Address is coming up, play dead. So, and these guys probably did the worst job of anybody in trying to play dead, I would suspect, because nobody dies in these positions. I mean, they're all facing backward, like, you know, kind of like we would play dead or something like that. Plus, these guys are seen alive in other pictures as well. This is a document like Leadford or something like that. There's a great article written about all this, and this one guy, I think his name is Jacob Schenkel, and he talked about shooting these photos or having these photos taken on November 11th, 1863. One of those photos in a close-up version of it actually shows what we can call, I think, the first reenactment on a battlefield. Because, man, this is not dissimilar from Southerners being on these firing toward Devil's Den in 22 hours of constant sharpshooting and skirmishing that went on after the battle. I think so. There it is. Looks like he's got something like a droid. iPhones are smaller. But droids are about that big, I'd say. Something like this.
I imagine it's his cappy.
No way, absolutely not. We also have lots of post-war photography that we'll just zoom through, such as this great photo that people usually don't get to see of Smith's rear section in the Valley of Death, and in the distance, the battlefield trolley traversing the ground. It can help you to date this photo. You know it's taken after 1893.
Of course, these photographs, a lot of them are in the Library of Congress or the National Archives, but a lot of the later photographs were recorded by William Tipton in the 1880s and 90s. And we can learn a lot about the battle by not just looking at the Civil War photographs, but photographs that are recorded of the battlefield in years afterwards. And this is a really cool photograph. I noticed it at the Adams County Historical Society in the early 1990s in a Tipton sample album, and I decided to find the location of this rock. And I just wanted to mention that I had to take my camera and my copy stand and my lights into the historical facility. I had to then record a photograph of it with a close-up lens, and then I had to take the roll of film to a place. And I had to fill out a form, and they sent it away. And then a couple weeks later, I got it back, and I got the print, and then I went onto the battlefield and found it. This is something we're going to have to tell our kids.
Well, and some of the people even in his audience, when we were working on our early books, including Tim's Lee's Headquarters book, there was no program where you could take some text and tilt it. So you couldn't take text and tilt it onto a map. So you had to print it out and cut it out and glue it onto your map with rubber cement. Which, when you're drinking Bass Ale and when you've got 100 of those things to do, and it's really sticky, it's very difficult. By the way, Tim did locate this.
And of course, this is the site of, the death of Colonel John Wheeler of the 20th Indiana, not far from Devil's Den, the highest ranking officer from the state of Indiana to be killed in the battle. Oh, the Table Rock. This is an 1867 Charles Tyson stereo view of the main rock at Devil's Den, the boulder on top of the other boulders. And in the caption, it says, the Table Rock. And it's called that because on top of it, the rock is flat. And not unlike the famous Table Rock in Niagara Falls that became popular in the early 1800s, people would have picnics, I guess, on top of the flat rock. So rocks that are large and flat are referred to as the Table Rock. And I like Devil's Den and like this photograph so much that eventually I moved to the town of Table Rock.
That's right. And of course, the Table Rock was also a popular place just off the battlefield on private land to be able to come in and carve your initials. It looks like I have these in the wrong order. Give me a quick sec. You can kind of see some of the rock carvings in here. Trust me, if you don't believe me, there were hundreds of rock carvings all around here. But when the U.S. Government Commission came in 1893, they made the decision that if you allowed people to keep carving their names in there, that the practice would continue on forever. So they carefully removed them, which meant taking a huge chisel and banging it into the rock. And really, you can still see these scrapings on the rock, but people did largely stop carving into the rocks in Devil's Den, right? I love that. Yeah, not bad.
This is another one of our discoveries that we're very proud of over the years, and that is the gazing soldier, we've come to call him. And before I took this photograph out onto the battlefield to locate this position, the books that this photograph had appeared in said that this was Little Round Top. And I know it's a very, we're cutting hairs here, but this was not Little Round Top. This is Devil's Den, and we're looking across Plum Run Valley towards Big Round Top. So knowing where the photographs were actually taken gives you the ability to line up the photographs and learn more about the appearance of that area.
And I'll tell you what, Big Round Top is substantially less wooded than I would have expected, at least here in the 1880s. And it's splitting hairs, too, not cutting hairs. Oh. I thought that would go a little bit better. Or else I would have never broken it out. Just to point out, we have tens of thousands of photos taken at Devil's Den, such as this one of our favorite flooding at Devil's Den. This is Plum Run. That is the bridge you walk over Plum Run at Devil's Den. There's another one taken the other direction that shows the entire Valley of Death just completely flooded.
I can't see the photo. So one of the things that we wanted to point out is we have a series of photographs from Little Round Top. And this is a famous Matthew Brady photograph from the top of Little Round Top looking north along Cemetery Ridge. And there, in these next few photographs, we just wanted to point out that there are still areas of the battlefield that we need to clear trees to make it look more like it did at the time of the battle. So, at the present, we are not finished cutting down trees.
Not remote.
We are not finished removing hotels. So this is one of my favorite views. And again, Gary says anyone could find this view. It doesn't have to be us. I was working for a project for the Gettysburg Foundation for the museum. We were gathering photographs, and I got onto the website of the Rochester Museum and Science Center to look at photographs that they had in their collection. And I found this photograph while I was perusing a collection of photographs by Samuel Fisher Corliss. And this photograph is not at the time of the battle. It said it was 1882. And the photograph said it was Round Top. And I think it said Harper's Ferry. And immediately I realized this is Little Round Top at Gettysburg. And it's 20 years after the battle almost, but it gives us a perspective of how far back the trees were. This photograph is taken from the parking area at Little Round Top, looking down the hill prior to the avenue being placed, which was put in there in 1882. And there's a large flag on the summit of Big Round Top. And the path that leads off to the 20th Main would be where the two guys are on horseback. And on the right, there's a series of rocks, and that would be where the 44th New York Monument is. The wood line at the time of the Civil War was not on the west side of Sykes Avenue. It was on the east side of Sykes Avenue. And all that area across the 83rd Pennsylvania Monument, out to, of course, the 44th New York, was open at the time of the battle. And we have other evidence that proves that. Here's a photograph from the summit of Little Round Top by Matthew Brady. And if you go out there today to this same location, this appears on a park wayside exhibit on the very summit of the hill. You can look south, and you can look where Big Round Top is, the outline, and you know that the tree line was much farther back. And we also have an 1867 drawing of Little Round Top that appeared in a John Batchelder book on the repulse of Longstreet's assault. And in this drawing, you can see the open front half of the hill. And actually, you can actually look over in the trees and see the charge of the 20th May. I don't know how good it is from your angle. But this is from the Confederate approach to Little Round Top. Okay.
And then just another thing, this is on the very, very summit. The one Tim was talking about is actually taken a little bit below it. This is the very crest of Little Round Top, right near where the Parrott guns are located at Hazlitt today. So you can see that the stone walls went, in fact, the tallest ones went all the way up to the top. And you can see what a difficult thing it would have been even to walk around the summit of Little Round Top. Look at this, just stumps and sticks and everything like that all over the place. Very difficult, even after they moved all these rocks to build them into stone walls after the fire. fighting was over. A lot of good it did them then. Largely over, I'll say. Even down the hill a little bit. Most of you have seen this right below the 44th New York monument. This appears on the wayside. You can see the individual sticks probably used as tent poles by the soldiers just a few days before this. And it occurs to you, you can't help it when you get there and look at these photos, you start to see that this is the debris of battle. The soldiers stood there just days before. All this stuff we're obsessed with about Little Round Top, man, these are the things the soldiers took and dropped and used while they were there. If you roll this up, you can see it says rifle cartridges. This is some of that much-needed ammunition that you always read about. The Mainers and the Pennsylvanians are searching their dead and wounded comrades for ammunition. Well, here it is, right there. And I'm pretty sure this is even cartridge paper right there. I put this up on Facebook before. One thing I do is put a lot of photo details up for people to contemplate. And there's at least 30 or 40 items in there that you can identify. Another photo you hardly ever see and I hardly ever get to show anybody is this one, kind of a failed negative by Alexander Gardner taken right at the summit. This is that highest spot of the stone wall I was just talking about. But despite the poor quality of it, you can fix it up a little bit in contrast, and I'll ask you to focus in on that rock right there above the stone wall, and you can see it. It's still right there today. So you can see this is right below the 91st Pennsylvania monument. That guy is on a droid, I think, in that photo. You can connect them, and you can just see these two rocks very clearly in both photos. Again, this took me about, 15 minutes once I had the will to print it out and take it out there. Again, I didn't have to send my photos away to a photo place either. We have it much easier now.
Here's a painting at the park, Kohler, I think it is, and it is a contemporary view of Little Round Top, a painting showing one of our favorite rock formations, the Curious Rocks. It's just an odd view. We just thought we'd throw it in. Very cool.
Yeah, another one taken in 1867. Tim, how long have we looked at this? About 5 years. We took this photo out there, sometimes the original stereo view, because this is a 3D photo like most Civil War photos are, looking for that rock, looking for this one, and one day I just happened upon it while I was actually looking for it. Right below the 44th New York monument, you can see how the wall has changed, and every time you do this, you learn a little bit more about our great battlefield here. For 14 years, I looked for this rock that was simply labeled as storm damage 1896 Little Round Top. We know there was a horrible storm there. We lined up all the other ones, but this one remained. And man, did I look for this forever. And then one day, it just, I walked by it and checked it out, and it worked. There it is, right below the summit of the Little Round Top. That's the road out toward the 20th Main. Here's the main road up Little Round Top. Of course, you have to pose in victory once you find it. Just wanted to show an aerial photo. William Tipton was able to get up into a plane in the 1920s, I think this is. I can't read it from here, but really early on, it's cool to see the old road up Little Round Top. Used to go right by the 44th New York. That's Patrick O'Rourke's 140 New York monument. The road went all the way up there and around. The roads on the battlefield have changed, and every time those roads change, and you see why they had to. You know, horses went like 2 miles an hour, and even cars went like 4, and then the faster cars started to go 10, 20 miles an hour. They had to straighten out the road. But they changed the battlefield every time, and it's important to keep up on how the battlefield has changed so we can see what the veterans were talking about. Just to talk about Big Round Top for a brief moment, here's a photo we looked for how long, Tim? 10 years at least. It was a long time. You know, a long time. It just says where General Farnsworth was killed. We always figured this was along South Confederate Avenue. That is clearly Big Round Top. We looked along South Confederate Avenue, both paths of it, because that road has been moved many a time till eventually some of our friends, Tom Daniger and Barry Martin, found this rock right smack dab in the middle of what we call the D-shaped field, right next to the 1st Vermont Cavalry Memorial, right in the middle of this D-shaped field, and all of a sudden opening up the earliest photo by far of that field I think that we know of. Well, there's one that shows it from up here around the same time, a little earlier. Many of you don't know that there was a wooden tower on Big Round Top early on. Before, in the 1880s and early 1890s, that tower was removed to make room for a bigger tower. But first, you can get some great views up from that tower all over the battlefield. This is from Tim Harper's Weekly, is it?
Frank Leslie.
Frank Leslie's, oh, the rarest of the rare. And then they built this huge one when the government came in 1895 and erected 5 steel observation towers all over the battlefield, one on Big Round Top. Anybody here ever go up in this one? Come on. Yeah, all right. I think there was like secret weddings up there. Tim's got some great stories about this. None of them were his. I think his wife is here, so I think she would be able to substantiate that. at the foot of Big Round Top, significant roads were built on this Telford system with big pointy rocks filled with smaller pointy rocks and still smaller rocks, then graveled and rolled with a steamroller. A substantial series of steps, 116 steps, used to take you up Big Round Top on a completely different path than how you go up now, and that's why there are seemingly monuments in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere on Big Round Top, because they put them along the path that they thought people would be taking up Big Round Top at the time.
We're really excited about this. I guess we don't want people to forget about this, but one day Gary and I were out trying to line up some photographs on Little Round Top. We specifically had a photograph of, maybe it was the 18th Massachusetts marker for their third day position, and we lined it up. We found the pole. A Civil Roundtable, or another organization, had recently cleared the side of the hill, and Gary brought up the concept that perhaps this missing monument was still in the area, and we searched the area, and Gary saw, and I got to give Gary the credit for it, he saw a pole sticking out between two rocks, and he reached down and pulled out the monument to the 22nd Massachusetts Regiment that had been missing for years.
And much to everybody's surprise, we turned it into the National Park Service. As you see here, Scott Hartwig and Winona Peterson came out. We took this photo in celebration. It got into Civil War news.
Let's tell them, though, after discovering the marker, we put it back and hid it in the place we found it. And then a few days later, we took people out to show them where it was.
I remember it was a nerve-wracking time. We were afraid someone else was going to come out. I found it, or something like that.
This is my favorite view of the wheat field. A little-known time period when the Park Service was attempting to beautify the battlefield.
One giant garden in the wheat field, because it's such a happy place.
Obviously, that is an artistic license by the postcard company. Another thing we've always been obsessed with is this 1880s photograph of the Wheatfield Road. At the time of the battle, up until maybe let me think, what would it be? The 1890s. There was a rock in the middle of the Wheatfield Road. And we have photographs of both sides of it. You would have to ride down the road and ride around this large rock that was in the middle of the Wheatfield Road. Boy, I wish they would have left it.
You can see Zook's monument there. You can see Little Round Top. You can see the non-existent woods on House Bridge. Pretty cool stuff. Just to show, I don't know if you want to get into it, but the roads in the Wheatfield have just completely changed over the years.
Obviously, there was electric trolley in the battlefield from 1893 to 1916, and it was condemned eventually by the federal government, the United States Supreme Court. And we have a few views of it. Gary wants to show. This is near the wheat field.
Now, it would go around the wheat field and then go around Devil's Den, and there was a switching mechanism that would warn approaching cars of others, but once in a while, that mechanism would fail. And people would be thrown bodily out of the trolley, where they'd be, bouncing off of rocks, broken bones, lacerations. Nobody died from this, but sometimes also the trolley would actually cross the road, Warren Avenue or other roads, and a car would hit the trolley. And I know one of the guys got thrown off the side of the trolley. Just real quick, you rarely get to see an actual stop on the trolley. This is the Wheatfield stop. You might recognize the first Michigan Memorial in the distance. And when you go out there today, this is from the Kern collection, taken right around 1905, I think, or so. And if you look at this rock here or this tree here, and I just love these signs here. I wish somebody would go into business and start selling these. I have a peach orchard sign as well. But check out the same tree today. It's rather easy to find. First time I saw this, I looked up to see if the sign was way up there or something like that. No such luck. There's the rock. So that platform was right here.
Also we have photographs of the people that lived on the battlefield where the second day's fighting occurred. And this is John Rose. John Rose's brother, George Rose, owned the farm over there, about 230 acres of land. About 19,000 Americans crossed their property on July 2nd. And in about 2.5 hours of fighting, there were 9,000 casualties on the Rose farm. We have an 1880s photograph of the Rose house. And of course, it was the fields around the Rose Farm, which saw some of the bloodiest fighting in the battle, that attracted the attention of photographer Alexander Gardner and his crew.
Now, William Fresnito saw these photos in books, and if you look at them, they were described as different places. Dead of the 1st Minnesota, dead of the 24th Michigan, dead of every other place except actually on the Rose Farm. But Fresnito quickly noticed in the 1960s, early 60s, that this guy with the bent knee appears in several of the photos. You can see him there, here, and here it is, and yet this one's labeled near the bloody ankle. And you can see that this one is often labeled dead of the 1st Minnesota and all over the place. He knew that this was the same group of bodies. He gathered them together. He looked into some of the same woodcuts and saw more guys. Here's the guy with the bent knee in another view as well. And he knew that that guy in the bent knee appeared in the background of the photo that also showed a V-shaped group of bodies over here. So he knew he was onto something but couldn't quite prove it. In the meantime, you can see that this one is labeled after the fighting in McPherson's farm, the famous V formation as well. But Fresnito knew early on that these were all the same bodies. He didn't just know where it was. He was able to make some sketches of some of the rocks and what the background would have looked like if he could ever find it, because again, you couldn't even take these photos out. It was difficult. There were no copying machines. You couldn't Xerox things out of a book in the 60s when he was doing this. Very difficult stuff. He would also eventually make a map of the V formation of the guy with the bent knee of the various groups of bodies and tried to figure out what orientation they were in, so if he ever find it, he could line it up. And then on March 10th, 1967, he was able to find what he had sketched out here, what we also call the split rock on the Rose Farm. This, by the way, is 28 days before I was born, and I'm sure it's connected in one way or another. And there it is, sitting in the woods in a far-off location, and suddenly, this place that nobody ever figured was really particularly important, we knew there was fighting out there back then, but that nobody knew quite the level of death out there, became the site of the most number of bodies photographed anywhere in the entire Civil War. More negatives expended and more in a group. A total of at least 55 bodies were recorded out on the Rose Farm. Here's the rock in the background. When they cleared the trees there, you can see it very clearly. In fact, I'll go back one so you can see these 3 rocks as well very, very clearly. It does not change, and that is one thing that's nice about boulders on this battlefield, is that you can really line it up well. Here's the guy with the bent knee. Here's the photographic wagon in which all these photos of the dead were developed. Another group not too far from there, you can show, and Fresnito noted that there was a rock heavier than it looks. That is at the head of the bodies, and he said that the rock was still there. He wrote that in the book. The rock disappeared in the 1980s. He got a note in the mail saying, "You had your fun with it, now I'm going to have my fun with the rock." Somebody supposedly put it near their fireplace, and then mysteriously it reappeared around 2004, and Tim and I went out there, I was with somebody else, and rolled it back in the exact position. You can see the exact position because you have additional rocks that you can line up really well there. So you're able to get it right in the right spot. You can see this little one here is still there. I was a little obsessed with it. Took close-up pictures and comparing the two. Called it a good friend of mine. In my mind, took pictures of it from 3 different directions. And that is how I know when somebody's written on Facebook that the rock was back and they put it in the same spot. I knew it wasn't the right one. You can see it's a very small rock. It doesn't have the same carvings. They did put it about the right spot, which is really good. But it remains, what's that? Oh yes, I'm sorry. It got stolen again in the last few years. Thank you, Tim. And it remains gone. I don't know, maybe it's out there somewhere and somebody just rolled it away, but it is really heavy. This is a difficult to roll rock, let alone to get through the fence and take and want to. It's a really odd circumstance, but it is a battlefield mystery. Let us know if you find it. Here is some of the famous V-shaped position, a photo most people don't see very much, as well as some of the other bodies in the background. Here it is from another direction, in the background of which I'll zoom in here and not show you the lone grave that sits there. Now, all these things that we're talking about, sometimes we run into people who are really into Civil War photography, and we show a new photo, and they say, "Oh, I've never seen that one before. I really wish that would be in a book." Well, you know what? The chances are it's in one of these 4 books. Fresnito's Gettysburg, A Journey in Time, Fresnito's Early Photography of Gettysburg, or one of his 2 Then and Now books here. And if you've already read them once, read them again if this interests you. This is the only really way to keep up on this. And this guy, I think we'd admit, is the most careful historian that we know. He does not say things unless he's really sure about it. He's not infallible. He makes mistakes. But go out and get these books. I would also say if you're interested in Civil War photography, and I'm not saying it because they're here, I would go on Michael Warker's Battlefield Perspectives for your old historic photos. Put stuff up there all the time. I would go on Pat Rich's Gettysburg Landscapes for your modern photography. I would go on my Facebook page, no offense, it's free. But I post all sorts of photo details on this stuff. And then, Tim and I together wrote, I think, 27 Civil War books, and they all have Civil War photos in them. Many available at your local public libraries, so we can't be seen as hawking our books right now. But just real quick, this idea of dead soldiers at Gettysburg in photos is a rare thing. It has never been done in American history before the Civil War, and in world history, the public had never seen photos of dead soldiers before. So just real quick, here is my journey through photojournalism early on, because as the Civil War started, there were no great photographic opportunities for documentary photography, but here in March of 1862, you have not so fresh graves on the First Manassas battlefield near the parking lot. By April of 1862, you have fresh graves out on the peninsula at Lee's Mill, or Dam Number 1. By June of 1862, you have a fresh field hospital with soldiers that had just fought the Battle of James's Mill the day before, most of whom would be captured within a day of when this photo was recorded. 2 months later, August 1862, you have more fresh graves on the Cedar Mountain battlefield, Cedar Mountain in the distance there. You also have, for the first time, dead horses on an American battlefield, showing actual battlefield carnage, not just the wounded, but the dead here. But the following month, September 1862, finally the photographic coup was achieved. 20 photos of dead soldiers on the Antietam battlefield that had shocked the world. As they said famously in the New York Times, if Mr. Brady has not taken the bodies and dragged them to our dooryard, he has done something very likely. It shocked the nation. But of course, real quick, you would think that people just, would be turned off by this and say, oh my God, you have to end this war. And no doubt some did. But others, including Abraham Lincoln, took the position and said, no, we cannot let these dead have died in vain. The following month, a St. Louis photographer named Brown took 3 photos out at the battlefield of Corinth, including one identified Confederate soldier named Colonel Rogers of the 2nd Texas, one more at 2nd Fredericksburg, 37 at Gettysburg, 7 at Fredericksburg out of Field Hospital, 6 at Spotsylvania, and 22 at Petersburg, for a total of 97. 97 photos in total that have actual dead soldiers in them in the entire Civil War. Every photo you've ever seen in the Ken Burns series, in every book, and everything comes from one of these 97 photographs, if the soldier is actually dead in there. This is why we have to use these. This is also why we're lucky to have 37, a full 38% of the dead photos are taken here at Gettysburg. Well over half of them at Antietam and Gettysburg alone. Why? This is a difficult recipe. This is in the East where photographers were. You needed a Union victory, which is pretty rare in the East. You needed a photographer staged to be able to get on the battlefield before the dead were buried, and you needed it all to work out. And that is why it's so difficult to do that. Other gains made in Civil War photography is, of course, real combat photography. A real boring scene seemingly on a beach outside Charleston becomes a combat photograph when you can see Union monitors actually shooting at Confederate positions around Charleston Harbor.
So, of course, we have photographs of some of the farms on the second day's battlefield. Again, the photographers who were here at the time of the battle did not focus on farms. They focused on other scenes. But William Tipton in the 1880s recorded views of the Sherfy farm with the 3 cherry trees on the side of it. Here is Joseph Sherfy and his wife, the Reverend Joseph Sherfy. He was a German Baptist Brethren minister or elder. Do you know what that is? Yes. The Dunkers. Yeah. Here in Gettysburg, the church is not far away. There are some really nice views of his house, including the wall facing the south, which has many bullet holes in it today from the fighting. On the north side of the house, there is a cherry tree that has an artillery shell sticking out of it that is the subject of many photographs from the 1880s into the early 1900s. Eventually, the tree fell down or was destroyed, but the artillery shell, I should say the cannonball, from that tree is at the Adams County Historical Society.
And look at how happy he looks, man.
And I get paid almost exclusively to guard the cannonball. And I'm the only one who's allowed to touch it.
See, he's like saying precious or something like that.
We have the Rogers family. If you've never seen the Rogers family. They lived on the Emmitsburg Road in a log house. And, I never knew that Grandpa Munster had lived at Gettysburg. They lived in a little log house on the west side of the Emmitsburg Road. It's the one right there. And their adopted daughter, Josephine, actually assisted wounded soldiers around the house after the second day's fighting. She cooked for the soldiers before the fighting on July 2nd. During Pickett's charge, Josephine hid in the basement with the wounded soldiers and protected them as Union artillery fired rounds and shells went through the house. And after the fighting was over, she went upstairs, she gathered more wounded soldiers, Union wounded, and brought them into the house. And she saved men's lives. And in the 1880s, when the veterans that fought in the 1st Massachusetts wanted to put their monument at Gettysburg, they wanted her to attend the ceremony. She had moved to Ohio. They tracked her down and paid the expenses for her to return to the battlefield and be a part of the dedication ceremony in 1886. Is that fabulous? And then, in what must have been a flash of creative excitement, they went inside the house, which was being torn down and replaced, and they took the stove out of the house, they fired it up, and she baked bread for everyone.
Sure, she was psyched. Thanks for bringing me from Ohio.
And of course, here's a photograph near the time of the Civil War of Josephine Miller, Rogers, Slider, the famous battlefield girl. Isn't that great? And of course, the house was torn down and replaced by another. But in the 1913 reunion, there's a sign, this is the house, or this is where the Rogers house stood. And you might notice in the photograph, it's not the best version. Maybe I stole it from like Mike Warwick's Battlefield Perspectives.
Yeah, they're not very high red.
There's Daniel Edgar Sickles.
Boo.
Sickles.
Nobody's a fan, are they? All right. Where are you, Jim?
One thing I wanted to point out also is, we go around the battlefield all the time, and we show these photographs from the 1890s, and they're really nice macadamized roads. While the roads that led to Gettysburg in the 1880s and 90s are in the same condition they were at the time of the battle. They're either mud or they're dust. But this is the Emmitsburg Road. Oh, this is a Kadori farm from one of those Frankenstein paintings at Gettysburg College.
The Munsters, Frankenstein.
Name's Frankenstein.
Okay, we're really going to cruise now, unless you guys get home too late.
And the Trossel farm.
Yes.
And of course, people have seen this. Catherine Trossel's farm, according to the account, 45 horses were killed in the Trossel's front yard.
And I always like zooming in on this one. You can see where they're trying to break through the wall while they're trying to escape the 9th Mass Battery, trying to get back to safety. Although their guns were captured, they would be recaptured by the Yanks, I believe. Here, one of the many mysteries around this battlefield. You've seen it, the unfit for service photo. You can zoom in on it and glow in the background. There are some theories as to where this is taken. I don't consider it confirmed. You can check for yourselves. You can see all sorts of debris on the ground near it and see that it's a light 12-pounder gun or a limber there. You can see that from these photos, they made certain drawings. They would combine various photos together, such as the dead sharpshooter, or the harvest of death, and the dead sharpshooter here, as well as the unfit for service. And you have these composite drawings. You can see the Trossel house over there being rebuilt as well. And moving on to East Cemetery Hill, you can see it was a big focal point, the only structure at the Evergreen Cemetery Gatehouse to be photographed by all the first 5 early photographers to get here. You can see Gutekunst went in front of there and took a photo of the interior of the lunettes. So when you see the lunettes on East Cemetery Hill, imagine them all strengthened with logs and everything like that. Of course, there's a vicious fight up there. It is documented from both sides. You know that the Union came through Evergreen Cemetery to help repulse the attack. I find sketch artist Edwin Foreman wrote dark brown on this building, therefore helping us to understand what color the Evergreen Gatehouse was.
At the time of the battle, the Evergreen Cemetery Gatehouse was painted a dark red that kind of is a brownish red.
Burnt umber, perhaps. You can see the battlefield taking shape where before they had cannons on the battlefield, they just had improper tubes as well as propped up on stones. Eventually they would be put onto proper carriages. There was a huge tower on East Cemetery Hill right where Hancock's statue stands today, and it says that the view was grand beyond imagination. Here they are when the battlefield had taken shape a little bit more. It looks like a little bit more like the battlefield we know. You can also see here that you can take out these photos really well, such as this 3D photo on the right, and line it up with Pope's Hill today. It really works well. Nice photo from Stevens Knoll Ford Evergreen Cemetery and East Cemetery Hill. Another thing about this is to see the pockmarks in all the trees on Pope's Hill. We don't have too many photos of this stuff, but I thought it worth showing that the photographers were obsessed with this book and the natural damage here. I have not seen anybody specifically blow them up and look for projectiles that might be sticking inside some of these holes. I had a blow up here, but apparently it doesn't work. And there are numerous photos showing damage to trees around here. Trees fell, trees lined up for breastwork, trees that are dying from lead poisoning, and Tim has pretty well documented that all these trees would die and turn into a field. Yeah. The dead tree area became just a field until there was just one tree left eventually, and that tree still stands there right off the breastwork. And of course, a photo of the burial trenches. You can still see these below Pope's Hill, and the distinctive rock in the background that Tim found many years ago with this bridge is relatively easy to line up. Many other discoveries have been found, made around there. Here's Tim on Rock Creek, near the old McAllister Mill waterfall. And here a photo of a famous couple of rocks.
We looked for this for like 20 years. Our best version of the photograph was from the newspaper, the Gettysburg, I guess it would be the compiler at that time. We found this from the Gettysburg compiler scrapbook. But it's Gettysburg's most popular swimming hall, a place called Two Rocks. And there's like a 2,000-page article about Two Rocks.
Yeah. Was there ever a boy who became a man or a man who was still a boy that hadn't seen the Two Rocks? Well, we finally found it about 7-8 years ago. And you can see the Two Rocks pretty far upstream. And it does look pretty comfy and actually enjoyable. Of course, Rock Creek used to be dammed and it was much more of a swimming area. Many people are still looking. By many, I mean me and Tim are looking for that rock right there that John Burns is sitting next to. That rock should be findable. That rock is, and these civilians appear in two photos of the 50th Pennsylvania in 1865 at Gettysburg. If you zoom in into the back of them, you can see some distinctive rocks that we should be able to find somewhere near Pope's Hill or Spangler Spring, but nothing to date. Some people have managed to find a ghostly soldier sticking up. You see his legs, his arm. There's his face right there, sticking up in the woods for you ghost people out there. Look around enough, such as this photo of Blandford Church at Gettysburg. Man, look at that. There's a ghost face in the side. Let me zoom in. Look at that. Oh, my God. That's real. But if you look at another photo of the same cemetery thing, you can see it's just shadows. Suddenly, the ghost face has been gone. Maybe it is a ghost after all. I swear, I've seen many clown and ghost faces in here. Let me see if they show up. Yeah, look at this one. Kind of a side-facing clown up here. And I don't know, maybe I was drinking too much when I saw that. You know what this atmosphere is like. And all these circles are no doubt energy spheres and orbs and people. So go on the Library of Congress, download a lot of these photos for yourselves and zoom into them. And although we have, I don't know, 200 or 300 more photos to go, I think we're out of time, and we'll be glad to take questions separately from you. But thanks for coming out here tonight. Happy Gettysburg Battle Anniversary. Great programs tomorrow. We hope you'll join in on some of the battle walks. And we will be glad to take questions as Chris puts out the fire and takes our program down. Man, you can see all the stuff we're going to get to. Oh, yeah.
The fires of ground and stillness.
Hold on, look at that. That's my first trick, my second trick, my third trick, my fourth, my fifth trick, my sixth trick.
Open the direction of the
And Tim's kid.
Thank you very much.